Yes, everyone, you know what time it is. It's your boys Jack and Dave here. We're going to have a bit of a conversation on Ange Postecoglou and his future here and how we might be thinking that he's sort of set up for failure at this moment in time. That's probably due to a few different reasons, and we're going to get stuck into them. But if you think that's already a ridiculous premise, or if you kind of feel like you understand where we're coming from, do let us know in those comments down below. Do smash that like button. But let's get into this conversation, Dave. And we're going to talk first about maybe some of the reasons why we think Ange is perhaps being set up for failure. There's so many that we got to get through, but I think the most obvious one that we're going to ram home, and might be ramming it home a few different times, is it's just the fact that the deadwood has not really been shipped off, and a lot of the deadwood that's even been brought on tour has felt, a bit unnecessary and just feels like an unneeded distraction, as well as sort of a hindrance to him. And players I'm sort of thinking of are like Sanchez, Eric Dyer, Joe Roden, Alfie Whiteman, Brandon Austin, and you could probably think of some more. But do you feel like that's probably one of the first places to start? Is he's been kind of set back, or maybe at least hindered by the fact that so little players have been shipped out?
Look, first of all, I want to point out when Ange Postecoglou comes in and says he's going to give everyone a clean slate, right? I can understand why Ange Postecoglou done it from his point of view, because if he goes against that, all of a sudden he's only in the job a couple of weeks. He's gone against his word. Then it starts to make players unhappy. And we know the result of players being unhappy. They come together, they get the manager sacked. And so I can understand from Ange Postecoglou's point of view why he done it. However, Jack, the club should have took onus on this. Off the back of last season, with so many managerial turnovers, so many fractions within the squad, so many players who have proven over multiple years and doubled down on it last year and shown that they're just not good enough to play at the level where we want to be or where we aspire to go to. So the club already knew these issues regardless of the appointment. And I just feel the club should have been more proactive about it so that when it did come time for Ange Postecoglou to bring his Tour-on squad, he's more or less going with what he already sees, what he wants to work with in the season. And then on pre-season tour, he can sort of, get them drilled down and honed down. And then also on his style of play. But also then when you go into the positions like fullback, the coaches and him can just double down and work extra hard with Porro, because with the size of the squad and with so many players, futures up in air, so many players that, he sort of he needs to sort of turn around, or if he has to use them, he has to turn around. There's only so much time your coaching staff can put into each individual. So I just fear that, positions like Porro trying to convert him to a right back is suffering because of what we're doing and how much we're putting into the likes of Ndombele, Eric Dyer, Sanchez, people like that, who are just ultimately not going to be here or shouldn't be here.
And I do feel like the fact that he's had no new defenders really to experiment with on this tour has also been a huge hindrance to him, and has definitely in some way probably made it at least a bit harder on him. And that's what we're trying to kind of express here, is there are a bunch of little things here that sort of surmise or, kind of sum up to what could be, a big sort of hindrance to him. And I feel like the fact that he hasn't had any sort of defender that's different from last season to experiment with this back line is definitely something that's probably led to some unnecessary goals conceded, but has also just led to, I think, him just having a bit of a headache where he probably would think he would have a better partner to pick for Romero right now to kind of build that foundation with, but he actually hasn't. He's had to go with sort of, the best of sort of, you would say, maybe the bad options of Ben Davies, Dyer, Tanganga, Joe Roden, maybe, but it's all just still like just bad experiments that won't really work at the end of the season and will ultimately kind of come back to hurt him. And so you sort of feel like maybe another sort of way that he's been set up for failure is just the fact that no new defenders to even experiment with, alongside Romero. It doesn't even need to be the main signing like Tapsoba. It could have been, somebody like a Tosinat or a Bio. It could have been, one of the cheaper signings or maybe one of the players for the future. But the fact that he's had nobody else to work with, I think, has been a huge hindrance to him. Dave, would you like to speak on that, or should we maybe get stuck into the fact that also maybe Harry Kane, is kind of hurting him as well?
Just quickly, I just want to say, I hear a lot of sort of excuses starting to be made about it, where it's like, oh, well, if this is what Ange wants. I mean, when are we going to learn our lessons, and when are we going to stop this? We said the same under previous managers. Let's be real about it. we have not given Ange Postecoglou any choice to make, especially in that centre-back area, because we haven't brought in anybody. So then what's happening is Ange Postecoglou has to come out and say nice things about these guys if asked in the press conferences or in the press, because he's not going to throw them under the bus if his future relies on them, right? But at the end of the day, it shouldn't, because we all know they're not good enough anyway. So let's just stop this whole pretendy nonsense thing where it's like, oh, well, if this is what Ange wants, it's not. We haven't given him any decisions to make. That's why the whole squad had to be brought on pre-season tour, because we didn't get enough out and we didn't bring enough in. So there was no decisions for him to make. So we have to start giving this guy decisions to make.
And just the fact that some of the work hasn't been done ahead of time for him. Like there are certain players that could have easily been shipped off. Like they could have probably found a new destination for Sanchez, maybe Joe Rota, and probably some other players as well that really we don't probably think are ending up, probably real Premier League quality. And that's what we're sort of saying. I think certain players you can maybe consider giving another chance to, or at least bringing on the plane and see how they do. But there are plenty of players that have been brought along that really just aren't Premier League quality at the end of the day, and also aren't really ones for the future either. So why are they really even there in the first place? I think we also need to talk about the fact that, Dave, go.
I just wanted to say, Jack, when it comes to players being given a second chance, I can understand it with one or two, right? If a manager comes in and says, okay, him or him, fine. But we're not talking about one or two. We're talking about 11, 12, 13, 14 players. And the reality is no manager wants to come in and give all of them a chance. And we always say, oh, well, Ange Postecoglou wants to take a look at them. He doesn't. He had a transfer meeting with Daniel Levy and Scott Munn before he even was officially appointed at the club on the 1st of July. We were told this through Ali Golden, through the press and people like that. So he told the club way back then what he wants out and what he needs in. And we just haven't done it. So we've just got to stop, and we've just got to stop making the excuses and just start demanding, because we all know we've been on this rodeo 3-4 years. We know what's going to happen, Jack.
He's been hindered heavily, I think, with the lack of movement with the outgoings as well as the incomings in that defense, and he's had to make certain experiments, try to make it work with really bad options. But another way I think he's going to be hindered, kind of in being set up for failure, is also in the attack, Dave. And that has maybe mostly to do with Harry Kane's future. Whether Harry Kane wants to go or not is sort of kind of out of his control, I think, with Ange Postecoglou. But the fact that he has been kind of given no clarity from either the club or from Harry Kane's party, it seems like, on the future, I think is definitely leaving him in some sort of type of limbo. I think it more falls on the club, because if the club tells Ange Postecoglou that, listen, I know it's a bit awkward right now with the media pressure and everything, but we are going to be trying our very, very hardest to try to convince him this summer to stay and to sign on a new contract. If that doesn't happen, we're going to be prepared to sell him. It doesn't really seem like that's been communicated like in any way to him. It feels like it has just been sort of, see how it goes, type situation with maybe the bids that do come in. I don't know. Just Spurs fans, right, have grown a bit tired of sort of what is the future of Harry Kane? What is the future of Tottenham Hotspur without Harry Kane if he is going to leave? And I think that kind of comes from the fact that the club has given no indication really on what sort of decision they are going to make. And it leaves, I think, Ange Postecoglou also kind of in a bit of a tough situation about what he wants from his attack. Does he want to build his attack around the best striker in the world? Even if he's not building it around Harry Kane, he would like to think that probably having a guy like Harry Kane is very different from Richarlison. Richarlison is a very different type of player, plays very differently, probably suits a different type of system, where Harry Kane is just operates and I'll probably bring so much more at the end of the day than Richarlison does, and so many different aspects of creativity, as well as just positioning and timing, and also just sheer finishing, really. So Harry Kane, I think if he ends up not really knowing his own future, sort of left in this limbo, deciding between, do I, make this, system a bit more beneficial to Richarlison? Do I make it more beneficial to Kane? That's also not something easy that he's dealing with.
100%, Jack. And look, I understand everyone's frustration around the Harry Kane thing, right? I fully understand that, and I'm not going to berate
I feel worse
anyone
for Postecoglou for it.
Yeah, and I'm not going to berate anyone for it. But Jack, we've got to be fair with the analysis. Like when you hear about it, it's just like, oh, Sal Kane, it's grand. Everyone's going to chip in with goals, but no one talks about him having Furuhashi at Celtic, who bagged 30 goals a season for him. You know what I mean? And we pretend that Ange Postecoglou's system doesn't need a top quality striker Furuhashi was the best striker in Scotland, and he bagged him 30 goals a season. So the reality is, his system does depend on a striker who knows how to score goals. Second point, Celtic were the best team in the Scottish League by a mile. Don't get me wrong, when he first took over, they weren't. But with his transfers and getting these players in and getting them built up to the system, they became the best team in Scotland. Tottenham are not the best team in the Premier League. Right now, as it stands, we're the 8th best team in the Premier League, and we want to try and claw our way back up. And, sitting here 16 days out from the season opener, when really it's a summer where we should have been more proactive on all the situations, have a settled squad by now. So going into the Shakhtar game and going into the Barcelona game, you more or less know exactly what your squad is looking like, the shape of it, and how clued into the tactics the players are. But realistically, now we're going into a situation where we don't know who's going to be bagging them goals, and one of them is not going to make up the goals. So then you're looking at bringing in another guy. So then you're asking him within 2 weeks of the season to get one striker, to become the main man and deal with that pressure and that burden. And also, whatever, ways he had for the system to include Harry Kane, he's now got to put that on Richarlison as well. But also to get another guy in behind him and get him up to speed and help the system suit him so that he can bag goals. So you're asking an awful lot in that forward department, because realistically, even with Harry Kane, we've still got things to iron out. Everyone looks over the last 2 games and go, Harry Kane doesn't suit the system. Let's actually talk about tactics for a minute. Let's start with the knee-jerk reaction because he didn't score 3 goals like Richarlison. Let's talk about the systems. Son and Kulu play either side, right? Son off the left, Kulu off the right. Both of them players want to cut inside onto their stronger foot and have shots, which means then the runs that Harry Kane makes, because he's being asked in the Postecoglou system to play off the shoulder of the last defender and get in the box, when they pull the ball back inside, Harry Kane then has to readjust his position and absolutely everything else. No one talks about that. In the second half, when you have Perisic one side, Solomon the other side, playing on their preferred side with their preferred foot, the balls went in the box, and which means Richarlison also asked to play on the shoulder last defender, benefits from it because we're swinging balls into the box and we're putting him in good positions while he's running off the defender.
There are a lot of good second balls in the box that, either Richarlison recovered or that even he knocked down, that, players like the Lo Celso then recovered for goals. And you think about it, like some of the work that Richarlison was doing in that penalty area, Harry Kane could easily do himself and sort of also bring those knockdowns and also kind of lead to those second balls and etc. But continue.
I'd also say, Jack,
go ahead.
Just quickly on that, I'd also say, if you put Richarlison in with Son and Kulu, which looks like his preferred options from Ange Postecoglou, he's going to suffer the same problems. So we still have that front three to work out. Where do you put Son on the right and Kulu on the left and get them to start putting in the balls into the box and ask them to maybe sacrifice cutting inside all the time, and maybe that comes with sacrificing a few goals. So let's not pretend that you sell Harry Kane. Richarlison's just going to walk straight in there with Son and Kulu, because we don't. We still have problems across that front three where we need to get our 3 best players all to fit into the system that works for them all into gel. So by selling Kane and just going, we'll go with Richarlison, that does not solve the issue. That problem's still going to be there.
And also, I mean, this is maybe a small kind of tangent here, so let's not get too deep into it. But a lot of people do kind of talk about how Kane maybe doesn't exactly fit the system as well as Richarlison does. Whether that be true or not, isn't it kind of also the case, though, that world-class players, Dave, aren't exactly system players? And there is the benefit of that with world-class players, is that they kind of can just sort of make it work, whether you're defensive, possession-based, maybe a bit more methodical, or maybe more counter-attacking, whatever style is really there, a world-class player can pretty much make it work and be able to contribute more than others can usually, even if they might prefer a certain system or might prefer a certain style of play. What makes a world-class player, if I'm not mistaken, is sort of the fact that they can kind of just play in any team and they can kind of just dominate really in any game or any style whatsoever. So while Richarlison may be more similar to a Kyogo and what Kyogo was being asked to do at Celtic, Harry Kane is not a guy that is dependent on systems. He's a guy who just scores this many goals and gets this many assists, no matter what formation, no matter what system. And there is kind of, that's not really been mentioned enough, I feel like. And I don't want to get down that tangent, but that's where I feel like could be mentioned more with world-class players like Kane, is that what makes them so great is that they're not really dependent on a system, at least in my opinion, that is. Do you feel like, too, though, the fact that we still haven't brought in center backs, Dave, but now that Harry Kane could be leaving, we're then left with 16 days before this game against Brentford, where we haven't brought in the center backs to partner Romero yet, which is crucial to build the foundation. But then also at the same time, we're looking for replacements for, extra additions to fill the void of Harry Kane leaving. Like, doesn't that feel like what we had brought up in the beginning of the season as far too much to do, far too much, pots and pans to be cooking,
Yeah.
before the summer window even ends up closing, right? Like, who's to say then that we end up getting all the players we need to replace Kane or all the defenders we need to partner Romero and build a good foundation if Harry Kane does leave now? So Postecoglou is again left with so many kind of questions with that defense and with the attack if he were to leave. And again, only 2 weeks basically left until Brentford. I just feel like that's also a huge hindrance and setting
It's
him up for failure.
It's huge. Look, right now, Ange Postecoglou should be in a position where he's already, the 22, 25-man squad is already more or less taking shape. Everyone's bought into what he's doing, and now it's just about fine-tuning things, right? Going into the Premier League season. But what he's actually doing right now is just running around putting fires out everywhere. That's
Yeah.
all he's doing. He's trying to make, circles fit into squares. It's just never, ever going to happen, and that's what is the most frustrating part about it, because Jack, yes, we need a centre back to partnership Romero, but also, that one of them is going to have to take the role. So Ange Postecoglou needs to know which one's going to be his leader, which then speaks right across that back line, which makes the cause, which keeps the line in shape. Also, Vicario getting used to it, when to come off his line, when not to come off his line. Who all the creating angles for people to drop into, to be able to pick up the ball off from this, that, and the other. There's so much that goes into a back line that is not spoken about.
Yeah.
And, if you end up selling Harry Kane and we don't have that issue sorted at the back, you're then in a position where you lose the 30 goals that Kane scored you last year. You lose, I think it was, I think I worked it out way before Sky Sports, and then everyone hopped on it after Sky
Yeah.
Sports announced it. The amount of goals that I totted up where he scored winners and equalizers, I think last time I counted it up, it was 21 points. You take that away and we're still conceding goals at the same rate. It doesn't take a genius to know where that's going to leave us. Okay, it might not put us in the relegation or above the relegation zone this year, but it's going to
Certainly
put us
setting us
further down the
backwards.
table.
Yeah.
And then once that happens, the media then start piling on, and we all know what happens then. So, to even consider selling Kane without having one issue, without having the biggest issue sorted, is absolutely mind-boggling. And I feel sorry for Ange. I really do.
I believe even, to be fair to everyone when it comes, because I know we find ourselves very, on one end when it comes to keeping Harry Kane versus selling him. I think you even did say, Dave, if we did feel a lot more assured about the defense, like if we did feel like it was like a Jan Toby type situation, you said yourself you would be more considerate of maybe moving on, after Harry Kane, or you'd be more considerate of Spurs considering these offers and letting him go because you sort of have that foundation, that you're confident in, can actually work in case things go badly, with the replacement of Harry Kane's and in case things do take time for things to gel. So I don't know. I think it's, I completely agree. And, we have far too much to do now if he were to leave. Just quickly, though, and again, I want to set you down maybe your own tangent here. Do you feel like there's more pressure actually on Postecoglou just again if Kane were to leave? I actually feel like he all of a sudden then gets a bit of a, I wouldn't say a clean slate, but I think he gets more of a free hit actually if Kane leaves, because then really the pressure, in my opinion, is more on Daniel Levy to sort of kind of give him the tools to succeed. But do you feel like if Kane leaves, actually there will be more pressure on Postecoglou?
Look, I think so. Look, we got to remember, football at the elite level is a results-based business, and that's it at the end of the day. If you're not getting results, regardless of what the club have done to the squad, you're going to carry the can. We got to remember, after West Ham, some of the media were already laughing at Postecoglou, right? And because he doesn't have, the history behind him like Jose or Conte did, the media is going to be less inclined to give this guy room to work with, or less inclined to say, point things out and say, well, he's had to deal with this, he's had to deal with that. And what happens then is the media start talking, then the fans start listening, and all of a sudden, then the fans start agreeing with the media. And we start ignoring the problems within the squad. And no one can tell me, oh, Dave, that doesn't happen. It happened under Conte. And I'm not sitting here arguing Conte's case. I'm not getting into a debate with anyone. But the reality is, when I heard people saying, oh, well, they're international defenders and they're better than this, that, and the other, Conte should be doing better. That's where I get into the rounds of like, come on, like, we're asking the guys to do the impossible. Let's let's stop that. And it's sort of, I just feel like Ange is going to run, or Ange Postecoglou is going to run into the exact same thing where it's like, well, we know he's a great attacking manager and plays great style of football, which we all want. But he has to form some sort of defense out of them. It can't keep going like this. And it's like, yeah, but what point are we going to sit there and say, well, only Jesus was the one that was able to turn water into wine? When do we sit there and say that, a manager is only as good as the players that he has to work with? Some players, whatever it be for mentality reasons or whether it be for,
quality reasons,
quality reasons, it doesn't matter. At some point, you have to say, look, he's just not good enough for this elite level, and we've got to stop throwing managers under the bus for it. I get what you're saying, though, Jack, where it comes like,
I just think it switches towards Levy. Yeah, switches towards Levy, I feel.
Yeah, I think from the fan base, if Levy were to sell Kane, I think for a period, that they'd stick by Ange Postecoglou and be like, well, look, you've made his job harder, this, that, and the other. But you also got to remember, half the fan base are also calling for him to be sold. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, if he does get sold, I think, the pressure does become mighty on Daniel Levy even more. But it still won't stop Tottenham from sacking Postecoglou. At the end of the day, they hired Nuno here. The fan base were mightily unhappy, and everyone was at the board, but they still sacked Nuno. People were mightily unhappy with the board with what went down last season and everything else, but they still sacked Conte. So regardless whether the pressure gets put on the board or not, even more, which it will, they're still going to sack Postecoglou if it ain't going right.
That's a fair point. And what I would say too is we often don't always consider context every single time that maybe results happen, right? We're not always saying, well, right, he doesn't have the center backs, or, well, he hasn't really, been properly back. Like sometimes we do just sort of react in the moment, saying like, what the hell was that, right? He needs to do better. He should have done this with formation. He could have done that. And we do end up getting in that sort of, we're human at the end of the day. So we're going to get, sort of mixed up between sort of always, remembering the context for maybe why Postecoglou needs time versus then also feeling like, well, he still should be doing better, type of thinking as well. And that's, I think always going to happen. And you're right, maybe in that regard, that in certain weeks, maybe if he loses to a team maybe he shouldn't have, it will probably be judged, more based off of him than really what he's been given, with the tools and everything like that. It's kind of a slippery road in that regard. I feel like off the back of a season, though, Dave, where we had a lot of, managerial turnovers, I think you had something to say as well.
Yeah, it's just like, we've fallen out of Europe. We've fallen behind teams, that I thought we'd never fall behind in my lifetime, but also that have their act together. They have all the infrastructure off the pitch put in place, where their scouting department is doing well. Then they have the people to be able to get the deals over the line. Then they also have the people to be able to get the people out, the players out of the club that they need to move on. You look at Brighton, look at how Aston Villa are acting, Newcastle, etc. And it's like with Tottenham, we reach a certain point, and we never really sort of go to that next level. But what you're seeing is teams coming up above us now, and they're willing to go to that next level. So we were coming into this season, Jack, where we actually needed to be proactive more than ever before to close that gap, but also to try, if we can, steal a margin on the teams ahead of us. And we started off that way, right, by bringing in a Vicario even though a deal for Hugo Lloris hasn't been done. We started off like that by bringing in a Madison and boosting our midfield options to 10 players there to pick from, and we also done it by bringing in a Solomon to bring him back up. But, all of a sudden, since the preseason tour, we reverted back to type, where we're being reactive rather than proactive. And now it's like, well, we've got these 3 players in. Now, you can all see the size of the squad we have to bring on preseason. You'll all agree it's too big, and now we need to get players out. But they're not in a rush to force these players to make a decision to leave. Because if they leave it in the player's hands and the player goes, there ain't any competition around here, I'm still getting 85K a week. No, I'll stay. And then the club just go, okay, grand, and then we won't bring anybody else in. And it always falls to the detriment of the manager. And it's just like, I'm just frustrated, Jack, because it's a summer where, after what happened last season, with the change in bringing in Postecoglou, they were able to change the sort of general atmosphere around the club, get the fans excited again. But all of a sudden, 2 weeks out from the season, that's being reined in by absolutely everybody. And everyone's being frustrated. And I just look around at other clubs doing business in areas that we need to do. And it's like, well, why couldn't we bring that guy in here? He'd improve us. You know, and it's just becoming frustrating. And like the title of this video, Jack, it's just setting Ange Postecoglou up for failure, because even if they do bring in the centre backs now, he's running around for 2 weeks trying to make that partnership with Romero bet in. Also,
Why are they the last
partnership with the
signings?
left back bet in. You know, the partnership with Vicario to bet in. And then also, not only that, then he still has to work on Porro, trying to be a right back. He still has to work on some of the centre midfielders. If Kane goes, then he has to work up there. So it's just not ideal, and it's just frustrating. And yeah, that's all I have to say on it, Jack.
I think that's what we were just trying to bring forward here, everybody, that I think Ange Postecoglou is not being given as fair of a shake as he should be. And this was supposed to be about, changing a lot of, sort of the things about the squad, as well as sort of the way that Spurs act. And I think certain ways we did see it in the beginning, but I feel like Ange Postecoglou's had his hands tied behind his back in a similar way to how maybe previous managers have. And it's a shame, because he is going to be, bringing a different style and a different brand of football, much more attacking football. But I feel like he's going to be suffering similar sort of kind of roadblocks and similar sort of obstacles in fielding a strong 11 against good teams that previous managers had. And if you guys agree, disagree, let us know in those comments, please. Hit that like button as well. Feel free to grab a membership if you do want to support the channel and all the different content that we're putting out there for you guys. But I think we'll leave it there, everybody. Come on, you Spurs. And as you can tell, we really want the big Ange to succeed. So in the big Ange, we trust, baby. See you, everybody.
Sign centre backs. Purr, purr.